So we're going to do 2018. 2018 question says, if dy dx is equal to 3 sine 3x plus cos 5x, and y is 1 when x is pi over 4, find the value of y when x is pi over 2, and give your answer correct to 2 decimal places. Okay, so my equations, this is 2018, part A, 10A. Right, we've got dy dx equals 3 sine 3x plus cos 5x. Right, so we can use limits here because we're told that y is 1 when x is pi over 4, and we want to find the value of y when x is pi over 2. So we could use limits in this particular case. Right, so let's first of all separate the variables. So I'm looking for dy is equal to 3 sine 3x plus the cos of 5x dx. I'll integrate both sides and I'll use limits of 1 to y and pi over 4 to pi over 2. Okay, once I do this, this will become y equals, when I integrate sine x, it becomes minus cos x. So that will be minus 3 cos 3x over 3. And when I integrate cos x, I get plus sine x. So that's sine 5x over 5. I'm going to use limits. So instead of finding a constant of integration, I'm going to go from 1 to y and from pi over 4 to pi over 2. Okay, so when I do that, let's see, what does this become? So the left-hand side becomes 1 minus y is equal to minus 3 over 3, will just be 1. So this will be minus the cos of 3 times x, which in this case is 3 pi over 4, plus 1/5 the sine of 5 times x, which will become 5 pi over 4. I'm going to subtract from that then the entire equation when I put in x equal to pi over 2. So minus 3 over 3, of course, will become 1. So this will be minus the cos of 3 pi over 2 plus 1/5 the sine of 5 pi over 2. Okay, so left-hand side, 1 minus y is equal to the cos of 3 pi over 4 minus cos 3 pi over 4. That's going to be in the second quadrant, and of course cos in the second quadrant is positive. 3/4, so this is going to become 1 over root 2, sorry, negative, cos in the second quadrant is negative, and this now will become minus sine 5 pi over 4, of course, will go into the third quadrant, and in the third quadrant sine is negative, so this is 1/5 by 1 over root 2, so that's that first bracket. And I'm staying in third form because I'm going to be really careful here because it's question 10. So if I was going to put in that value, then I'd make sure it would be in radian mode in my calculator. So from that I'm going to subtract the cos of 3 pi over 2, of course, is 0, and plus 1/5 the sine of 5 pi over 2, that 5 pi over 2 would be the same as 3 pi over 2, so that would just be 1. Okay, now this becomes 1 minus y is equal to, so when I subtract these, this will be 1 over root 2 minus 1/5 1 over root 2, that will give me 4/5 of 1 over root 2. And when I subtract or add 0 and 1/5, that will be minus 1/5. So that means that 1 minus y, if I work this bit out here, it's going to become 0.366. So y is going to be equal to 1 minus 0.366, and that gives me 0.63. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. Now, second part of the question. It says, if there were no immigration, the population of a certain country, population X, would increase at a constant rate of 2.5% per annum. By emigration, the country loses population at a constant rate of n people per annum. And when time is measured in years, this is the expression we're going to use. dx dt is equal to x over 40 minus n. If initially the population is p people, find in terms of np and t the population after t years. So my variables now are x for population and t for years. Okay, so get into this sheet and starting equation for part B, I'm told dx dt is equal to x over 40 minus n. That's my starting equation. So initially it says the population is x and initially it's p. T years initially is 0. So after t years, find the population x. So they're going to be my limits. Okay, so let's find x. So dx dt, I'll separate the variables. Before I do that though, I'm just going to tidy up that right hand side here and I'll get common denominator. So that becomes x minus 40n over 40. And now I'll separate the variables. That stays as one package. So this will become 40 over x minus 40n is dx is equal to dt. And I'm going to then integrate both sides. So 40 is a constant, so that's going to be 40 times dx over x minus 40n is equal to the integral of dt. Now, something to remember, because we don't come across it too often. Remember that when you integrate 1 over x, your answer is the ln of x. And when you integrate 1 over x plus some constant, then your integral is ln x plus that constant. So remember that. That's a handy one to know. Right, so when we do this, this will become 40 times the ln of x minus 40n, based on this equation here now. And that's equal to, when you integrate t dt, you just get t. And of course I'm going to put in my limits. My limits for x side are p to x, which I should have put in over here. And for the t side, 0 to t. So p to x, 0 to t. Okay, that means the left-hand side becomes 40 times the ln of p minus 40n minus, and 40 is a constant, the ln of x minus 40n. That's equal to the left-hand side, which of course, putting in those limits, 0 minus t. So 40, I've got the ln's, I'm subtracting the ln's, so I'll divide them, make them into a quotient. So p minus 40n over x minus 40n. And that's equal to 0 minus t is minus t. Remember now, I'm looking for x. So x is tied up in that ln. I'm going to have to get it out. So I'll get rid of the 40 first of all. So the ln of p minus 40n over x minus 40n is equal to minus t over 40. To get rid of that ln, to release this here, I'm going to e both sides. So this becomes p minus 40n over x minus 40n is equal to e to the minus t over 40. Okay, what I'll do now is I'll cross multiply here, and this will become p minus 40n over e to the minus t over 40 is equal to x minus 40n. I'm nearly there. I'll bring this up, I think. So p minus 40n by e to the t over 40 now. So that will become positive, is equal to x minus 40n. And then, of course, x, I'll bring over the 40n. So p minus 40n by e to the t over 40 plus 40n is equal to x. Okay, so I have my expression for x. Next part of the question says, given that n is equal to 800, p is 30,000, find the value of t when the population is 29,734. So the population, of course, is x. So I'm just going to fill in the values into this equation here and see what I get. So I'll just move this fella out of the way for a second. So this becomes, so my equation is p minus 40n by e to the t over 40 plus 40n is equal to x. Okay, so I'll put in the values given. I'm told that P is 30,000, N is 800, and X is 29,734. So I'll put all that in. So this becomes 30,000 minus 40 times 800, that's inside the bracket, by E to the T over 40. And that's plus then 40 times N, which is 40 times 800, is equal to 29,734. Okay, so this is going to be 32,000, so that will just become minus 2,000 inside the bracket by E to the T over 40 is equal, or plus, there's another 32,000 here, is equal to 29,734. Right, so let's work all this out. So what do I get? Minus 2,000 e to the t over 40. I'll take that 32,000 over the other side and I'll get minus 2266, which means that e to the t over 40 is equal to, dividing by 2,000, 1.133. Now the t is tied up in the e, so I'll have to ln both sides. So ln both sides here just becomes t over 40 for the left, and that would be the ln of 1.133. And when you do that, you get t over 40 equals 0.1249. So t is 40 times that, and you get 4.99 years.